Hello everyone, welcome to Where I Belong podcast. Today we have with us Tiago. He's an author, and his recent book In Search of the Infinite is out. And he also writes on Medium. And I will give a link to his recent blog post. Welcome Tiago. Thank you for joining with us today.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me again. So, yeah, it's a pleasure
Yeah,
to have you here.
yeah. We will start with the religious side of the questions now. If we go with the traditional thinking, like from conservative perspective, um, like all what conservative says that God gave us free will and scriptures to follow to be a good human beings, and He will not interfere with human affairs like what we do and human suffering that is happening around the world, and He will not interfere with what is happening in the Gaza or like in Sudan, and He will not answer to our prayers. He will not um, save dying innocent children. Then my question is that what is the use of a god?
Oh man, that's such a heavy question to open with. But yeah, it's a very complex topic. So like maybe let's start with the free will part. So like free will is already
Mm,
like a super like messy topic. Like I struggled with free will a lot when I was younger because I came from a very scientific backgrounds, and as to me, like on a typical scientific paradigm, like it's basically impossible to argue for free will. Like it basically just makes no sense to posit that it exists. Like I don't even know a way to do it. And that was also what kind of like led me away from kind of like the typical scientific mindset, because I knew that was real, and I knew that I propositional couldn't argue that it's real. And so I saw a mismatch, and I kind of chose my experience over my intellect for that. Um, so I definitely believe in free will, but how you frame free will can vary like massively. So like when you say like the free will in theological terms, like there's a billion like ways to pick that up. But I'll try to give it a very general answer. So like the way you kind of presented it is kind of like traditional Christian context. First of all, right? So like God gave free will to humans, and then why doesn't God interfere, and so on and so forth. So uh, something that I like to think about a lot is actually, first of all, when thinking about theology, something that I found very helpful is like, if you think about how reality should be, a really good heuristic is like, if you were gods, how would you design something? Like, and it sounds kind of like, I don't know, like narcissistic or something, but it is a good place so that you can kind of get into that mindset. And it doesn't even mean that you believe that it plays out in this personal way, but it's just a kind of a good mindset to have. And to give an example to that is something that I thought about a lot about when I was a child is, if I could wish for anything in the world, what would I wish for? Right? It's kind of like the genie in the bottle type situation. And, you know, I kind of, the most immediate thing is kind of like, oh, I wish to have this. I wish to have money. I wish to have, whatever, right? Or I wish to have a toy. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but, whatever I wanted as a kid. But then it's kind of like, well, that's kind of selfish. So I also want to make the world a better place, right? So it's like, wouldn't it be nice if there was no world hunger, right? Surely everyone
mm,
can agree on that, right? So it's like, if the universe was designed, why not being designed in that way? But then the problem is, okay, if you have infinite power and you could make a universe like that, why would you stop at world hunger? Like there's plenty of other suffering that is going on, right? So it's like,
yeah,
okay, so you're also going to eliminate all cancer. Okay, that's fine. Are you also going to eliminate all disease? Probably, but it's already starting to get tricky, right? And it's like, okay, and what counts as disease? Is aging a disease? It's like, okay, now you're changing human experience quite a lot. Like that alone, not everyone would be on board with that. I certainly wouldn't, for example. And then it's like, okay, even if we were immortal, are you going to eliminate all suffering? So it's like, no one has depression. Okay, maybe. How about sadness? Are you going to limit sadness? Is a form of suffering to some degree. So it's like, if you follow that train of thought, you immediately get into trouble. Because what happens is, if you reduce all these things, kind of the impression that I got, and I still think this is true, is that you kind of feel like you're going into a simulation. Right? You're going into a
Mm.
reality that you yourself crafted, where it's like nothing really matters, right? So the traditional, one of the traditional Christian theological answers to this question is that gods, whatever, like reality was built in a way where it can move out of its own accord, right? And humans do have this capability of making choices, even if it's very small. Obviously, we're very determined by biology and culture and tons of other things. But there's a spark there, and that spark is all he needs. And then that's and the Christian answer has actually twofold. One is like humans have that capability, and that's part of what causes evil in the world. And then the other one is there's lots of other evil, but that has to do with the nature of gods, that he doesn't want to intervene. And there's actually several answers to that latter part. So like some theologians would say like that God limits himself in order to not be able to basically intervene. And it's kind of like, obviously, unless you literally believe these things, it's very hard to like talk in this way, but you have to kind of shift your mind a little bit. But if you think about this, and you think about kind of like my thought experiment of when I was a child, you can see where this is going, right? It's kind of, and there's actually a really fun TV series that I just watched, an animated series on Netflix. And I kind of forget the name, but it's basically like this plot where uh it's kind of like a science fiction theme, and
Mm.
basically AI gets more advanced, and there's like uploaded intelligences and things like that, and eventually it gets so advanced that basically they can play God and simulate the world. And basically at the end of it, if you can simulate and create anything, like everything is completely meaningless. Like what do you do at that point? And what they do is that they
Mm.
basically become gods in their universe. And then within a simulated universe, they basically erase their memory, erase their powers, and they start over in the beginning of the series.
Oh.
So it's like they became God, and then like they
Mm.
strip that power and that memory of them. And obviously, you don't have to believe this is technologically possible, but it kind of plays with kind of like
Mm.
um, a lot of these ideas. So that's a few kind of like thoughts about it. Another thing that I would say is like, to the problem of evil, it also helps you. I think this is actually a really important topic to think about, because to me personally, part of this topic deals with not only gods, but also the nature of God. It's like how personal gods could be, if such a thing existed. And it's kind of tricky, because in Christianity, there's this very big tradition of that God is the being beyond beings. It's like the ground, like it's a very, like the way that people talk about God, as if it's like this I don't know, dude in the sky with a beard or whatever. Like that's almost unintelligible to like early
Yeah.
church fathers. But at the same time, it always has, the Abrahamic tradition always has an element of like a person, and there's very complicated
Mm.
reasons to do that. But there's like this tension of like, it's abstract, like don't make a caricature out of it, but also it can't be infinitely abstract. It's still somewhat like a person. Like you can't go all Spinozian. Like if you do that, then that's not kind of Christianity to some degree.
Mm.
But so there's a spectrum, and where you fall in that spectrum is very tricky. But then that matters for the problem of evil, because the problem of evil, in my opinion, is very easily answerable with a free will question. But then, for example, other suffering, like animal suffering, for example, I think is a really compelling argument for me personally, which is like, why is nature ripping apart like everyone? Like, why couldn't we just all be vegetarians, and like there like,
Mm.
or to get like, I don't know, energy from the sun? Like why would we have to kill? Like it's just kind of insane to me. So it's like you have to answer that. It's just like, if it was designed like this, like why was it designed like that? And what would be the alternatives? And then there's a whole branch of theology there. But yeah, this is super important question, and yeah, this is many books long, but this is just kind of my initial thoughts on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I get what you're trying to say. Free will in general, like not from the conservative perspective, it is that okay, you have ability to make your own choices that without any influence of anything. But I think if you speak from the scientific perspective, it is that there are so many influences behind your decisions that you are not unaware of. So if you go by uh, scientific definition of free will, and if you go by the conservative definition of free will, it's like they don't make sense, like as we like spoke. But yeah, like I mean, I free will is a concept like I really I'm so interested in that. I think once I get time, I will surely jump into that. Like I mean, I want to read like so many like perspectives about that one. Like just don't want to limit myself to the scientific community.
Yeah, so like it depends exactly what you mean, but to me the most probably the most obvious thing that comes to mind is that conservatism has this idea that you can do everything on your own, basically, right? It's kind of this idea of like
Mm.
pulling yourself by your bootstraps and things like that. And it's kind of tricky because, like, to some degree, if you believe in free will, you kind of have to go in that direction. But then the issue is like, where do you stop, right? And conservatives tend to not stop anywhere sometimes, which is like pretty stupid, obviously. But also, like, if you do believe in free will, then you do have to like accept that perspective, right? Which is like we're
Mm.
definitely conditioned by a lot of things, but some things aren't conditioned, and therefore they're kind of your faults to some degree, right? So that's kind of like the main core of this political friction, I suppose, especially kind of in the kind of the American context.
Mm.
So and then where you fall on that will depend on your politics, and also depends on how you philosophically argue your points. Also, like how educated you are about certain kinds of um, evidence about for or against, kind of like how control people have. It also depends on what you're talking about, right? So even though this all gets lumped together, like this is like a thousand different variables, right? So it's like what applies to education might not apply, I don't know, to intelligence, might not apply to, I don't know, more like, so there's all these different facets, right? And they all have, different levels to it.
Yeah, the American conservatism, like the way I observe it is that when they say free will, that you are like everything, like you can kind of like sculpture your own life in a way that okay, if you take right kind of decisions, you will lead in a certain way, certain life. So you don't have to depend upon the government, you don't have to depend upon the people. So it's like everything is within your control. But the problem that I have with is that like people, there are generally good people out there, like who have like have really good intentions at heart, and they have never made any bad decisions in their life. Still they find themselves in unfortunate and unfortunate situations where they cannot pull themselves out. And you cannot go to that person and say that okay, it is in your control that you can come out of it. Yeah, so it doesn't make sense, and you are in a way like making him feel bad that okay, you are responsible for your own situation right now you are in.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And again, like, uh, yeah, and this is why it's important to kind of like try to situate if we're talking about like how political are we talking about compared to like philosophically, because
Mm.
like no one in philosophy argues that, because that's such a stupid argument. No one even goes there, right? And I would say even conservatives, I would say if I tried to press them like individually on a conversation, they probably wouldn't go there either, because I think it's just so absurd that you can't possibly defend, even if you don't have any philosophical background whatsoever. I think the issue is that it's not so much like a detailed like philosophical belief, but more so like a general direction of their worldview and their stance towards the world, and kind of like the representation of their political stance towards the world, right? And they end up being a bit extreme because they want to make sure that you know that this is what they believe and this is like a core value that they don't want to get impinged on, right? So it's kind of like no, like people do have a choice, right? And so it's like, do they have an infinite amount of choice? Like, are they not restricted by their social and economic, context? It's kind of like they would have to argue that yes to some degree, but they're trying to just make their case in a very broad stroke, I would say.
Yeah, in our last conversation, I asked you about how religion can be soothing and comforting to us. Like I meant to say it in a certain different way, but the conversation went into a certain way. So I would like to clarify my point. It is that people who are going through hardships, who are going to like very tough times, when there is literally no hope, there is no kind of savior in their lives, so they kind of like say to themselves that okay, god will be with me, or like god doesn't give me hardships which I cannot carry, compared to the atheist who has to take the ownership of the situation and take so much of accountability, like who has to go through like anxiety and um what do you say, and literally like compared to the person who is religious and an atheist, like a religious person might find some kind of relief in that moment compared to an atheist one. So I meant to say that like religion can be comforting and soothing us, like at least at the hardships.
Yeah, it definitely can, and it's actually funny because that specific segment, that like the specific topic you talked about, I think it's actually the clip that we kind of like both posted on our page as like a joint post, and I actually had
Mm.
someone on the comments kind of like make that exact point to kind of like yeah, to kind of like strengthen that perspective, and
Mm.
yeah, it can certainly be the case, obviously, and like my worldview is pretty religious, and I generally in my
Mm.
work I try to kind of make people understand religion and kind of like try to understand the value. But if there's a thing that I think is dangerous about religion, it's precisely this escapist kind of element. However, it's a bit tricky to like define where escapism kind of is to kind of like actually delineate the border. Because something that I've realized, in, especially I would say in the last couple of years, is that like to some degree what happens is like they have faith, right? They have faith that their condition is gonna improve. But the thing is like I can't even put it in words how my perspective shifted, but I started to see faith, especially in this context, as more like almost like just a different conceptual grammar of hope. It's kind of like me, for example, my mother like passed away from cancer, and like when she had cancer, someone that was like very religious in a literal sense, they might say, they pray to gods that my mother will fight cancer, right? And I didn't believe that. I didn't believe that there's some kind of being that would have the power to cure my mother, but I couldn't help but hope to ask reality that she would improve, right? So like I wasn't praying for her to get better, but I couldn't expect to have that expectation. I couldn't even though I didn't really want to, because I try to be like a very realistic person. So it's like there's a group of friends and everyone is kind of like try to be optimistic. I'm like the pessimistic guy, like trying to be very realistic. I'm
Mm.
like, don't get your hopes up and whatnot. But even though I have that personality, I still couldn't help but have this stance towards the world that I hope my mother gets better, right? And I think that's just kind of indistinguishable. That's the same thing. Like expecting reality to deliver you same like some result is kind of the same thing about having faith in God that a certain outcome
Mm.
will kind of be delivered. Like that's how I've kind of came to view it lately.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, even like I'm same as well. Like I try to be as realistic as I can. Man, I mean, like the things that I go through, like even though like so much of hardship, like I try to take in. Like I will not say to anyone. Like what I believe is that like my suffering is my own. Like I don't like to vent it out, or like just want to go through it like by myself. So even there will be like one or two moments like where I will be like at most low, where I feel that okay, man, wish things could have been better. Like it's like I say it out loud. Like I say to myself that okay, man, I wish that things could have been different. I wish like things are um favorable to me. So like I mean, I get what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
coming to the another question, it is that so people who are ultra religious and hyper religious, so to speak of, like they have very hard time thinking critically, even though if you provide them the evidence, even like they try to attribute everything to the god, try to like as we say, as we just spoke that okay, if someone is cured, we will say that okay, god helped him or he helped her. So like even though like obviously doctors are there to take care of her or him, so my question is that does religious belief come in a way of critical thinking?
So there's a lot of facets to this. I would say the most basic question is, or rather, the most basic way to respond is trying to view it empirically. Like, what's the relationship
Mm,
between, let's call it like rationality and religion? And I would say, generally speaking, there is kind of like a trend towards kind of like less critical thinking associated with like religiosity, but it's not very strong and it breaks all the time. Like there's stuff where there's certain cases or certain demographics where you would expect to find the link and you just don't. There's zero link, or it's the opposite, or like the religious people kind of
mm,
come on in front. So even though I'm not going to deny that the pattern exists empirically, I think there is, but it's not as strong as you would expect from this type of narrative. And there's just tons of stuff involved, right? Because, for example, is it the religiosity or is it like some other co-founder that's kind of behind the
mm,
religiosity? Like, for example, education and things like that. It's very hard to like tease these things apart, these types of studies, because you can't do like random control trial on this, right? Like, let's make someone more religious and then like see the results after
yeah.
of like rationale metrics, even ignoring how like complicated that is to even grasp. Um, but it also, yeah, it's super complex because like even the empirical question aside, like there, yeah. So I would say two things. So like one is it depends on what you think the person is trying to do. First of all, so for example, I have this chapter in my new book. I'm writing a sequel now to my previous book, In Search of the Infinite, and one of the chapters there's something that I realized is that and coming back again to my mom, I suppose I'm kind of honoring her memory a little bit. Is like as I was a kid, like my mom was super religious, by the way. That's kind of the context, and I got super annoyed at her all the time, precisely because of this type of context that you're saying. Which, like, so for example, something would happen, she's like, "Oh, thank God," or "God
Mm,
didn't allow this to happen," and I was like, "This is stupid. Like, you make no sense whatsoever. This has zero sense. This is not rational. It's not logical. Blah blah blah." I was that type of person. And again, as I got older, then I see that things a little bit different because it also has to do with again the stance towards the world. Like it's not just a logical thing. So for example, the example that I give on my book is like I remember one specific instance where the car broke down that you had as a family.
mm,
And my mother was like, "Oh, the car broke down. This is a sign from God that I need to kind of like buy a new car because the car was like super, super old. Like we weren't very economically well off and whatnot." And at the time I was like, "Mom, like this makes no sense. The car broke down because it broke down. Like it's old. Like there's no meaning to it." The problem is like your life is a story. You can't escape meaning. Like you have to integrate the facts somehow. And like this has to do with the very nature of meaning, which is like it's this and this is going to be super messy because this is very complex and I'm still trying to like articulate my thoughts, and on that chapter I tried to do this, but the way that I try to explain it is like there's an objective and a subjective element to meaning, and like the subjective element is because it's not like raw facts of the real world, but it's not purely subjective in the sense that you can claim whatever you want. So the way that I framed it is like my mother had an event occurring in her life. The car broke down. It's like, okay, maybe there was some randomness to it, right? But then it's like, okay, but what do you do with this fact? Because her life is already a story, which is like, I am going somewhere, I have certain values, I'm trying to accomplish something. And then it's like, how does this tiny story, which can be viewed as such a tiny story that would become a raw fact, even though it isn't. It's still a story, it still has meaning. But it's like, how can that story be incorporated in the greater story? And that depends what the greater story is. And in her worldview, there is such a God, and she's trying to go somewhere, and she conceives of reality as unfolding in a certain way towards those goals. And so I think now that I look back, I think it's not unreasonable to have that stance, which is like, the car broke down, and does it have something to do with God? It's like, well, there's certain, because the way she conceptualizes God is like, the, the, there's a narrative in the world, like history is progressing towards something, and I'm part of that narrative as a Christian or has a person, right? And so it's like, okay, how does this event relate to that? And in her mind, it's kind of like, the car was old, which is true, and the car broke down, and now I need to get a new car, and that's going to be a better decision because reality forced me to make this better decision, which is like, actually, I shouldn't have been driving this car because it was old, and I was just putting tons of money into the repair. Like, I was just being stubborn. I was just hoping that, it would be worth it, but it's not. But then reality, God gave me this gift, this revelation, which then forced this perspective, and that gets incorporated into my life. So yeah. So these types of like, what people say being logical or not, that is super complex. Like, life isn't logic. Life is a story. And sometimes analytic logic and analytic thought is very helpful. And sometimes it's just absolutely irrelevant or even super counterproductive. So it's just the way that people think about reality and the way that people think about what is a human life and how do people actually live in the real world. Yeah, that kind of changes how you frame these types of responses that you get from like over religious people.
Yeah, I mean, not just religious people. Like, I have seen like in cases of the, like, like India is a super religious country. Um, like we are subjected to, some people are very subjected to superstitions and psychosis. Like, there is one family, like, there are two daughters and a couple. So they are like, headmasters of school or like professors or something that kind, so very educated. So they got into this psychosis, like they like this superstitious belief that if they sacrifice their children, like, which really happened, this case, recently they got they word it too. So if they sacrifice their children, so they kind of like get into a more uh, prosperity of that kind of.
Mhm.
So they did kill their daughters, like it's kind of like a sacrifice ritual they did. And it's not just one case, there are so many cases that are happening in India, like even like as we spoke, there might be something else happening too. So, like, when I read these things, like, okay, like they are so educated, like how come they surrender themselves to this kind of beliefs? Like, I also feel that education is a way, like, especially in India, it's just a way to get a job. It's not like, it doesn't make you think much
Right.
about like what is happening, like what is presented to you. So I mean, like, people are like go have been gone through like so much of shit in their life, so many hardships. They are so vulnerable and inside. So like they try to find a way where they can like be normal again. So I feel that, okay, then these kind of people like get into this kind of stuff. Like, what do you think about?
Right. Yeah. So obviously, it's a super sad story, yeah, and obviously, like you said, it's not an isolated case at all. But to some degree, this also ties to what I was saying, which is like it. Let me see what the best way to put it. So the best, maybe the simplest way to put it is, first of all, like, clearly those are cases of psychosis to some degree, right? So it's like, first of all, you're kind of like blending this like religiosity with kind of like a mental health event that maybe we have to be a bit more careful of like how we join this
Yeah.
together and then how we break it apart. But the, and probably the easiest way to think about it is like that type of like superstition, even on the most casual level, like that didn't go away with religion. That was also something that I realized as I was getting older, which is like, again, my mom was super superstitious, for example, and I had other family members. And as I was a kid, I was like, this is just complete nonsense. And like these people just don't think. But then I was like, okay, if only we get rid of religion, then all of this will be in this like perfect
Mhm.
enlightened utopia that's like purely rational. And like as I grew up, like it was very obvious that wasn't the case because I saw people that were completely secular, but they were also super superstitious in their own ways. Like you just shift kind of like the level of explanation, but like that doesn't mean that the level of explanation just because it's secular that it makes any sense, right? So it's like, for example, if you have and again, this is hard to entangle like healthy from mental illness. But like, for example, if you see like someone kind of like going towards schizophrenia type symptoms, for example, like a lot of them, that a lot of times that involves a supernatural element, but also sometimes it doesn't, right? So it's like maybe I'm feeling like I'm being followed all the time, right? And it's like I make these like very weird connections. I like everything is super meaningful, everything is super salient, and I start to think that certain things are evidence, and I keep kind of like going deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole, and like it has the exact same like disastrous consequences. It might lead people to like do very bad things and irreversible things, damage to themselves, damage to others. Has nothing supernatural, but like their thinking is completely dysfunctional either way. So I think we just have to. I don't want to dismiss what you're saying, and I completely understand, obviously, but I just think it's a lot more complicated than that. I don't think that if you just took religion out of it, that those problems would just magically disappear. Like I really don't think that is the case. Maybe they would improve, probably, but even that, I don't think it would be by a lot, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that. I don't think like only religious people kind of have that kind of belief. Even the superstitious beliefs can be seen in secular and atheist people too. So I recently I have read something in Canada. It is that there is a family and they have the daughters. So the father was like, it's the same psychosis case. The father was like, there is a hunchman on the family, so they are we should be always on the run. So they keep on changing the motors, and they keep on changing the houses. And even this father psychosis was so much that it kind of like infected her mother too. So they both of them like believing the same story, they are inflicting the story to the children. So one day so the daughter was kind of like very skeptical about it, like we are always on the run, we did not see any people, any mafia is coming, not no, no mafia people are coming behind us. Like why like my parents are kind of doing this. Then she made up a story that there are people who are banging my door, literally there is no one, so banging my door. So she told this story to her mom. So her mom was like, this must be definitely a mafia people. So there are agents in front of your house, so they will take care of it. So it's like then she got in this insight that okay, so all this story is just made up. So they kind of like got into this psychosis. And I mean, like it is true that like people can, like if you have been through this kind of experiences, it kind of makes you feel like you've been through a lot, so being on always on the run, like you don't feel safe and safety security everywhere. So what if your own parents are doing this, like you cannot fight. So yeah, I mean there are like so many cases that happen, like even with the secular and atheist people too.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely super super tricky and very sad cases. I'm not sure if I understood fully the logic of the story. I think I got
Yeah.
lost in some places. But
Mm,
yeah, again, it's kind of like this disentangling of like potentially religiosity, let's call it,
mm,
supernatural thinking, whatnot. And then there's kind of like the mental health aspect. And then there's also
mm,
the individual aspect of like what they're dispositional to, like what is their economic status, whatever. Like there's so much
yeah.
baggage into it. And it's like, when we see a situation, it's like, how does this all interplay? And it's like super, complex.
Yeah. So, like one of my personal belief is that belief and thinking is that there is life outside religion. That you should always limit religion for your own spiritual purposes. Like, do you agree with that, or like, do you have any counter arguments to
Can you just phrase that again one more time to make sure I understood it?
that? Like, I personally believe and think that there is life outside the religion, and you should always limit religion or religious rituals or the festival to just for the spiritual purposes. You should not make like religion as your life.
Right.
So yeah, so do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a completely reasonable stance. I obviously fully
Hmm.
understand it. I would have agreed with you 100% when I was younger, and so many other people. Now, I would say I would put it slightly differently. Like, obviously I believe that there's a life outside religion, but then again, this is very personal, right? It just depends on your worldview. Like the way that I view it is like religion is just like a cultural system of living a life, and that has certain practices, certain ways of thinking, and you can't really escape that to some degree. So it's like, obviously I fully understand what you mean by, kind of living my life, and religion is just over there. If I want, I can participate or not. But it's kind of like the spiritual thing, this individual thing. I don't need it. Other people can do it. Like, that's fine. What I would argue is that but again, this would kind of require a lot of unpacking. Is that I think you can't actually do that, because the argument that I would make, and that I try to make it my own work, is like, reality is inherently religious. There's just no way
Hmm.
around it, because religion is about having a worldview, having a cosmology. It's about the very structure of your cognition. It's about recognizing hierarchy. It's about recognizing purpose. It's about meaning in life, how you conceptualize meaning in life, how do you make choices about things, and then it's also about this like very recursive element of like, not only like what do I know, but like how can I know what I know. But that doesn't mean that it's like propositional logic, right? So like, if you think about all the talk that I said about my mother, like a lot of it is narrative based, and I believe that you still have this exact same setting of like how you build your model of the world, even if you're completely secular. You just use secular language, right? But like, you still have all this machinery either way. And I know that a lot of people would disagree with it, but it's just kind of my own experience, my own readings, kind of like what I ended up with. And the reason why I kind of turned religious to some degree is because in the beginning, when I started being interested in religion, I was like, okay, this is all very interesting. Like, I'm finding all these patterns, but like, it's just how people talked in the past, and now I can extract all of this philosophically and put it in like secular language. In the beginning, I even thought I could put it in scientific language. That was kind of my project. For example, when I first started my book, that was kind of like what I was trying to do.
Mm,
And then I realized that that's kind of like impossible slash a little bit stupid. And then what I eventually realized is that not only not only is that project kind of failed in the beginning, but also, even if you did it, which you can do in some instances, if it's like isolated, what I realized is that even if you could do all that translation, you just end up with a translation. Like, it's just not the natural way that you can best utilize these systems and best like clarify your thinking. Like, you're always kind of like losing something, and one of the reasons why you're losing something is because by definition, human cognition is narrative based, when you're trying to extract that, like almost by definition, you're kind of losing the narrative a little bit. And also because a lot of what makes religion like is the fact that it deals with symbols, and part of almost the definition of symbols is that they're kind of inexhaustible in their own right. If the symbols are alive for a person or for a culture, it's kind of like something that you can continuously extract, and that's part of their power. It's kind of like this infinite source of reality. Let's say if you think about reality, about not just what it is, but about how you conceptualize what it is and what it could be. And so if you when you kind of do that translation, you're kind of like making a dead copy. Like it's not an alive, continual thing anymore. And so to tie all this to your question, it's like I totally respect that. Obviously, you can do that, but from my perspective, from my thinking, from my worldview view, I just think that you kind of end up doing the same thing as religious people do, but in a way that's just way less effective to lead a good life and to understand reality and the human experience at the deepest possible level.
Yeah, I get it. I understand your perspective too. Like the way I think it is that, yeah, I mean, even if you remove the religion, there are stuff that you do kind of like as similar as like what religious people do, but you are just naming it in a secular way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, this can be a fun question since we have, I have read a couple of books on anthropology, like the societies are formed. I think you have read so much about theology and religion and everything. So my question is that if you have a chance, like how you would design a religion, like from the start, like a fresh new religion.
Yeah. So I would say if I were to start a new religion, I would probably not do it at all, because I think religion has this element of always building on the existing culture. It's always connected to the past, and it's especially true of like the big religions that you think of. But also, if you think even before that happened, that was even more the case. Like if you go to really tribal cultures, like their system is very aligned with kind of like the ancestors and things like that. So it's like it always comes before you. And I think there's a lot of reasons why this is the case, but probably one of the biggest problems, if I were to do that, is first of all that I would make it about me. First of all, and like I would put my own biases into it and what I think, and like I would never put myself in that position. Like to me the endless source of um the greatest depth of religion is precisely that you're getting outside yourself. You're kind of like reaching for this like timeless wisdom. And so all the time, like every, I don't know, 6 months, I'm looking back at myself and thinking, oh, I was really stupid back then. So it's like, and then I think if I were to come up with my own system of living, like that would be disaster. Like I don't want that responsibility. Like I'm not wise. I am stupid. That should be always your first approach. So if you're stupid, you definitely don't
Yeah.
want to build like this massive cultural system that other people are going to follow. Um, and then there's other kind of like lines of argument as well. You can also think about it in kind of like evolutionary terms as well. If you kind of apply evolutionary thinking to cultural systems, it's kind of like the reason why these things evolved is because they have certain functions, even if they have bad functions and kind of like some parasitic kind of elements to it. On the overall, they survive because they do certain, they perform some net benefit. Just functions in the culture. And this is like very standard. If you look at like psychology of religion and evolutionary psychology, you kind of get a lot of this type of thinking. And even that alone, to me, even that alone, which is in my opinion is super dry, like that doesn't reach the depths of religion at all. But just from that argument, to me, that already kills the entire thing. Like I would never start a religion from scratch, just from that alone. And you see this a lot actually with New Age religion, because New Age religion is precisely what you're talking about, and I think it's awful for for a billion reasons. And so like we don't have to like think about it what it would be. Like people are already doing this, and it clearly doesn't work very well. So that's how I view it.
So stepping aside from the religious question, now we come to our favor. Now the ongoing topic, AI. So, I mean, I have been reading so much of like articles about this, that there is a news that we are living in an AI bubble. So, do you share the same view, and like, do you think like we're gonna be doomed in the coming days?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit what I mean by bubble exactly. I think usually the way that I typically see it is often talked a little bit more in like economic terms, kind of like the fact that there's
Mm,
so much VC backing and like is there actually going to be any revenue to it? And eventually, like the whole system is going to collapse, and it's just like very speculation based because supposedly someone will reach AGI eventually, and then everyone that on that particular thing is going to be all rich. So I think to some degree that's kind of what people usually mean by bubble. To that end, I agree that it's probably a bubble. Um, so yeah, that's all there is to it. But also like I'm not that much into
yeah.
kind of like the economic side of it. And then there's other perspectives, right? So to some degree there's an existential perspective, which is like are we
Mm,
all doomed, like you said? Um, and that is a huge question. Like I tried to answer that in the essay series that I published on technology.
mm,
So in specific, that's part 3 more or less, which deals I think with chapters 5 to 8, if I believe correctly. And I would say the way that I phrase it, I make a very complex, very long argument, but I do think that we are largely doomed, like not 100%, but close. And there's several reasons for that. One reason is because I think AI kind of number one, it kind of like dissolves the very essence of what it means to be a self. It's like the very
mm,
core of humanity gets slipped away. And this is a bit hard to unpack. Like I can't do it in like 3 minutes, but like but I think most people probably have an intuition that you kind of like lose yourself has kind of like this AI thing is getting forced, and that has to do a lot with kind of like losing the power of thinking. It has a lot to do with the automation aspect of it. It has to do with kind of like the increasing technologicalization. I can't speak anymore of society, where agency is diminished. Has a lot to do with the fact that we're increasingly programmed and biased towards algorithms that we don't even understand how they work. There's tons of things, but long story short, kind of like the very interiority of the mind kind of like slips away, and that alone is very bad. Number one. Another aspect is kind of also this blurring of the fake and the real. I think that's also super problematic. Like the most obvious aspect of that is obviously like image generation, like Stable Diffusion, and also the video models. But it goes much deeper than that. There's also an element of that with large language models, which is like you never know exactly what's real, what's not. And then at some point, also people stop caring if it's real or not. And also, yeah, and then like yeah, there's tons of issues there as well. But I think most people also can kind of understand that's probably not a good idea. And then to top it off, there's also a third threat, which is also an actual like survival threat, and it
mm,
has to do a lot with game theory. This is not very easy to explain in a short period, but long story short, the way that agents work, even if you don't attribute agency in what we mean by agency, but like in the intelligence that we associate with AI, even though it's not true intelligence, which I also argue in the article, if you follow that train of thought and what it means to build a machine like that, it's just unavoidable that you're going to run into an alignment problem, which is what the field calls. And that is just dangerous. And it's very likely existentially dangerous. And it's very likely completely unavoidable. I think it's completely unavoidable. And so I think, yeah, but long story short, I do think it's going to doom us all, basically. And yeah, it's
yeah.
very hard to explain why, like without going very technical. But yeah, people that are interested can read it. However, I don't think we're like 100% doomed. I do think that there's an escape, and I think there's two ways that kind of offer no way out. One is kind of like actually stopping kind of this AI arms race, first of all, um, which is very, very difficult. It's probably so difficult that it's almost impossible, but it's at least possible in theory. Like we did something kind of similar with nuclear weapons. Like maybe that wouldn't, maybe there could still be a nuclear weapon war tomorrow, but like so far it has worked decently well. Where we find out, okay, this is actually so dangerous that we all need to come together and like try to not all
Hmm.
kill ourselves, basically. So there's that possibility, although the very structure of the capitalist system makes that basically almost impossible to do. Like the incentives are so high that yeah, just twisting the system in the right way to make that happen just seems kind of impossible to me. But at least it's possible in theory. And then I give some of also the game theory implications on why that's the case, because like everyone is competing with each other and all kinds of things. So that's one aspect of it, which we can kind of consider like a social political stop to it. And the other one is more individual, and this connects, of course, to religion. So I think religion is part of the
Hmm.
answer. And so this is what I actually argue in part 4 of the essay series. I'm writing that now.
Hmm.
I should have it ready in a few days or a week or something, but somewhat soon, I hope. And I think that if each individual recognizes what it truly means to be human, I think you can greatly reduce how much we lose ourselves to technology, how much we lose ourselves to artificial intelligence. But that requires making the framework that I typically use in my work is like the idea of the sacred is like once you understand what that is, once you can kind of like um, make that real kind of for your life and for your worldview in a way that makes sense and it's not just like some word that someone conjured up. And once you orient your life towards it, I do think that kind of shields you a little bit from kind of like this technological dystopia that we're headed to. And I kind of make that argument in the last part of the series, and I explain why that's the case. So yeah, although one thing to note though is that, and this is something that I think is quite important that I think most people don't recognize, is that even though all these things I said are about AI, I think all of this already applies to basic technology. And I think a lot of people don't understand that this is the case. And I think if you don't understand the continuity of the technological thinking from the earliest forms of technology all the way to AI, you're never going to understand AI in its like deepest sense. And I think that's very dangerous because I do think you need to understand it in order to shield yourself from it. And this goes all the way back. Like I make a lot of allusions to all the way to Plato, because Plato warned of technology already in the form of writing. It has to do with like the externalization of functions within cognition. And then that also connects to art, representation, and mathematics, and all kinds of things. So yeah, I'll stop there. But that's my answer about AI.
Mm. Yeah, like speaking of like technology, every technology that comes, it comes with a promise that okay, it will take away your problems, it will save your time, it will save your energies. But my question is that what to do with the free time? Like, let's say that AI is kind of like solving some problems or some we are outsourcing some kind of thinking. So let's say that it saved my 1 hour of time. What I will do that? Like most I will scroll like or something like that. But the if I spend that kind of hour with the thinking or like writing something or writing a blog post instead of just relying on AI, but AI can be good in some ways, but I don't know, like it's kind of like every company that is driving this AI frenzy. I don't know, like they have this like huge thinking that okay, AI will like save humanity, AI will like help us like in the medicine, it will uncover like deep patterns that we are oblivious to. Like even right now, since the AI bubble rumor is there, so it's kind of like the investment that they have made, they're not seeing the results. So like with the huge investments that are kind of like dumped in the AI. So like what to do with the time or product, like another thing is that okay, it will increase the human productivity, not just like individual productivity, human productivity. It will increase, like I don't know, like it's kind of like very vague, like it's not specific, like how like it is gonna change individual life. So I don't really get like when they make these promises with the AI.
Right. Yeah, there was a lot to unpack there. But like, first of all, I was just gonna say what you mentioned about kind of like the kind of the ideology of kind of the tech space and how they perceive AI. You're gonna love my next Instagram post because what I'm doing is I'm kind of trying to because the essays on technology are so long.
Hmm.
I'm like doing a summary of like one post each on my Instagram, and the next one is exactly about this thing, like exactly about everything that you talked about. And I talk about this idea of like technology and AI specifically has like a form of salvation, and the whole like political force that goes behind it. So yeah, I think that's very much on point. I'll have to remember to tag you once I post that. I think you'll like to read that. Um, but yeah, so when you ask, and okay, so another aspect that you mentioned is also the productivity element. So this is actually
Hmm.
something that I disagree a lot with some people, because a lot of people that are against AI, they're also kind of the opinion that AI kind of is like overhyped, and it's kind of like actually this doesn't actually do that much. I actually disagree with that. I think AI is very stupid for the most part, and I make a very strong case in my opinion for that in my articles.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it's not very useful at the same time. Like it is. I think it is. I think there's decent proof of that. The reason why there's a bubble is because that usefulness so far can't make up for the insane amount of cost that it takes to actually train these models, and also to operate. Although the compute isn't as intensive, it's more the training process. But like that doesn't mean that it's not useful. It just means that the ratio is off. But that's going to end at some point, because like basic models are like getting better all the time. Like we'll probably have like the state of the art models that we have now. You're probably going to have an open source version of that on your phone running locally in like a year and a half or 2 years or something like that. Like it's crazy. So like that is coming, and when that happens, like that problem is solved. And I do think it's very useful. Like I use it all the time, even though I think I use it and I kind of feel bad about using it because I think it's kind of immoral. So I think I shouldn't use it, even though I use it. But that already speaks of how useful it is, which is kind of like I'm betraying my own values just because it saves me time, and I'm kind of like a stupid, lazy human being. Um, but I do think it's very useful, and the reason why it's very useful is because number one, it can automate certain things, and also what it can automate is dependent on. It has to do with kind of the semantic element of what it means to understand something, and and how information is processed. And this is very kind of a technical thing. I can't explain it very well in a short period of time. But in my article, um, technological dystopia, something like that, I wrote it last year. If people want to understand like what exactly makes an LLM super powerful and super useful, then I kind of like unpack why that is there. So so yeah, there is kind of like the ideology element that you spoke of. There's the productivity element that you spoke of. And then another thing that you spoke of is kind of like, okay, so what? Like, even if it's very productive, then what am I going to do with my life? And how I would connect that is precisely what I was talking about earlier. It's kind of like, that's a religious perspective. Because, like, now you can say, now, this kind of depends on, like, how you use language. Like, you can say, yeah, it's not religious, it's kind of existential, but it's like, whatever. Like, those are the same thing, in my opinion, if you kind of like frame this correctly. But that's the point, which is like, there's no scientific logical way to answer that question. It's not only impossible; it's just like nonsensical. It's just like I don't know, trying to love your partner, I don't know, by cutting apples or something. Like it's just not even like categorically correct. So, so yeah, that is the question. Like that is the ultimate question. What the hell should you do with your life? What the hell is human life for? Like that is the ultimate question. And then it's up to you to figure out. And you know, I think the value of religion is like, well, some people that are very smart, way smarter than you, and much wiser than you, much kinder than you, they have used certain systems and they have come up with certain answers. And it has been my experience that when I look at these answers, it's like, oh, actually, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, like I can look deeper into reality if I put these specific glasses of how to interpret the world. But obviously, I can only speak about myself, right? So it's like if you or someone else listening to this, they don't feel that. I would say that there's reasons why that is because I think kind of modernity has kind of corrupted our ability to see these things correctly. But I might be wrong. So it's like if you don't see if you don't see well enough, or if you don't see better with those kinds of glasses, then you'll have to, I don't know, make your own glasses, I suppose, or find something else. But you still have to grapple with this existential question. Like science is not going to save us. Not even logic is going to save us. It's just like the bare bones question of mankind that everyone has to answer for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, like uh, I use AI for my college purposes. Like not just for like assignments, like not that, but it can like make you think in a certain way for while solving your problems, like especially the assignments. But the one thing that I absolutely like against in terms of like is the creativity aspect. So you should not like outsource your creative thinking to the AI. So like I have seen so many. I mean, I will not go into the economic aspect of it. Like AI should not make your book covers or something like that. So like the basic one, like in terms of like writing. So AI can give you like perfect articles or blog posts just by like a couple of prompts. But like the skill that you take to excel that kind of like perfection, it might be like 10 years or 20 years. So if you are settling for like what AI is writing for you now, so you will never gonna develop that kind of writing style or like your own voice, your own way, like how you connect with things, how you connect the dots. So like my point is that like AI should not be used for like creative purposes, and there is an ongoing debate about AI art, like how people are using AI to generate images, and they are considering them as like AI art, like this is a like kind of an art form. I don't really think so. I don't even support that. Like what's your view on like AI, like and creativity?
Yeah. So there's different facets of it. I would say probably the easiest one to start with is what you mentioned about the how AI interplays with the actual creation of a specific skill that the AI is like automating for you. And from that perspective, I completely agree with you that that's a long part of the argument that I make in my essay series on technology. And again, when I mentioned Plato and writing, that was already Plato's argument, like well over 2,000 years ago. It's like if you the very aspect of writing, you're already kind of like losing some of the memory and some of like the deep understanding. Like these people in the ancient world, like people, we don't even comprehend the level of education of like the average intellectual back. Like it's just like baffling. Like the average person that's kind of like within like the elite of the time of kind of like Athens, let's say, like it would completely blow out of the water. Like it's like the same standard today. It's just crazy. And like people had these massive memories. They had all kinds of systems. Like people could recite like huge portions of like the Odyssey just from their head. I get to even remember my phone number, which is like 9 digits. So like it's just absolutely crazy. And so yeah, I think what you said is absolutely right. And I think, and the problem, and this is also something that I make an argument on my essay. And I'm sorry that I'm referencing my essay so much, and like I'm like
Yeah, it's okay.
it's like self publicity, but it's just because I thought about these things so much, and like this is like my culmination of like trying to articulate all of this into like something that I can present to people. Um, but yeah, I think this is super problematic, and the the specific problem about AI, even though I make the argument that the problem of AI is continuous with technology itself, one of the reasons why there's also kind of a little bit of a distinction is because it infects like the very process of thought in a way that it's way deeper than anything else before. Like, for example, not just like memory, for example, which is already hugely important. Like, that's already a huge deal. But like the very aspect of cognition as well, like the very act of thinking, like the very situation of like an undergrad, like not knowing how to even think about the particular essay. It's like, what is Shakespeare about? Like, I read it, I didn't truly understand it. It's just like, go to GPT. It's like, I don't know, make a 2-page article explaining what Shakespeare is
Yeah.
about. Like, they don't even start the process of thinking, and like that's very unique to AI to some degree. And yeah, that's catastrophic. Like, it's exactly like you said. I think you're 100% um, correct. And about creativity, that relates to this like thinking aspect. It depends a little bit how you define creativity, which is a little bit tricky. But yeah, I think generally speaking, it's very dangerous to to play that game. But also, another argument that I make in the essay is also one of the big problems about AI is precisely that it asks it asks you to make that trade off forever, and that trade off becomes harder and harder for you to reject. Which is like, the technology keeps getting better and better, and then you're like, oh, I don't want to use it because I want to, I don't know, I value the process and whatnot. But then like the gap between what you could do with it if you did decide to use it just gets larger and larger, and then everyone else around you starts to adopt it. Especially in the professional context, this is going to be huge, because like if you don't want to use AI, it's like, well, you're not going to get hired because you're going to be 5 times as slow as someone else. So what are you going to do? It's just be unemployed now? And then like, it's crazy. And then this is going to affect to other things as well. And then this is also then going to apply to like to like transhumanist aspects of it as well. When there's going to be implants in the brain and stuff like that, it's like, are we really going to fall behind? So it's kind of like it's kind of like this losing game where you kind of like know that you're losing your humanity and know that you shouldn't go this path, but it's kind of inevitable. Like the world is just built in such a way where this is where we're headed. But yeah, so yeah, it's kind of all messed up from a society perspective, but at least individually you can try to resist as much as you can, which is kind of like what you should do. But again, I'm lecturing you, not lecturing you, but I'm speaking about this, and I use it. So that's already a pretty big pessimistic, case about how bad all of this is. So yeah, and then the art element that you mentioned, yeah, that I wouldn't call that necessarily tied to the creativity. Yeah, it can also be a bit creative, but usually I think at least the way that I see most people complaining about AI is more like the ethics of it, because it was like stolen from artists and things like that. But yeah, and that I agree. Like, it's obviously super messed up. I hope eventually companies will be forced to kind of like compensate artists for that, but probably not, because the whole system is so stupid and corrupt. Um, and yeah, and then there's also the element of like, what exactly is art? What is the purpose of art? Which is, again, in my opinion, is a religious question. But yeah, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, like, I mean, I feel like creativity is so innate, like something like, I mean, speaking of like religious terms, like you are blessed with creativity, something you should not give it to other people, like outsource it to the other things. Like you need to find a way where you can like unleash your ideas, or like way to like present them in front of the world. I feel that.
Yeah, exactly. I 100% agree.
Yeah, so I think you kind of like answered this question, like the final question, like in the first one. It is that, will AI destroy the humanity? Like you said, like it will. Like, I mean, just now you mentioned that like when we outsource the thinking or like the creativity, I feel like we lose a certain part of ourselves since we do that. Yeah, I feel like the more and more we use, like and I really liked your point about the trade-off, that the mission will be getting so intelligent that you feel like you are lagging behind, that you are in a way forced to use it, or like you are kind of like feel that you are adequate and you have to use it. So there will be kind of these kind of situation will arise sooner or later. So yeah, like, will AI will destroy the humanity?
Yeah, I'll say that it definitely has the power to do that because of kind of these arguments that I've made. I'll say very briefly to recap. I think the best way to do that it destroys your sense of self, like the very agency and like the very bare bones of recognition. It also blurs the external world about what's real versus what's simulated, and then on top of that, there's also the whole game theoretical element of it that is just a dangerous
Mm,
tool just out of how it works. It's hard to explain, but say on all these fronts, yeah, I think we're screwed. But again, I do think that there's these possibilities of like one is like a social response of like we just need to come together and like put a stop to that, recognize that this is a very stupid idea and it's going to doom us all.
mm,
And then there's kind of like a more existential, personal approach, which is just like I just need to live my life in a certain way where I'm going to try to resist this pull as much as humanly possible.
yeah. So I mean, these are. I mean, I'm still thinking about what you're saying, like kind of like observing everything. So, like even though I am like done with the question, but still I'm kind of processing it. So thank you, Tiago. It's lovely talking with you. I think audiences also will find like so much value in our conversation today, and I will share all blog post of Tiago in the description below. So thank you, Tiago. Thank you for like joining with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. You always give really nice questions. So yeah, it was a pleasure.